Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the last chapter of Quadratics. Yes, I can hear some of you celebrating from here. The last chapter, we're going to tie together some of the concepts that hopefully you already are familiar with because I've done a good enough job getting you to work and think with the difference between a vertex and x-intercepts so that there is no issues with what is the question trying to ask. Um, Over the courses of the chapters, we've slowly been improving our ability to find the x-intercepts. And we're going to continue that so that we can find any x-intercept in any situation. And that's actually where we're starting. We're also going to look at how to find vertexes. We introduced you to partial factoring, but that's kind of I'm going to call it inelegant. There is a easier way of doing it, but of course you're sitting there saying, why would I learn how to partial factor? Well, the partial factoring technique that you learned actually comes into play with the what's called completing the square. So it does kind of make sense to go through it all. Hopefully you're well versed in that so that when we do jump into it, you are fine. We're going to begin with a little bit of review. In order to solve a quadratic equation, it means you're trying to find what the x value is. This chapter, we're going to call them roots a lot. And I don't know entirely why they switch over, but for whatever reason, they do. So you may as well get used to the wording now. Okay, so solve each equation. And you've learned this already, but it is the focus today. We're going to break this up. Break it up. And for the first little bit, that's all it is. The second part requires a little bit more algebra, but the math behind it is pretty straightforward. Last chapter, we did talk about this, how it was how it explained the cheats. And then we got into the slightly harder version of what happens when the cheat isn't exact. And we went through how to solve. So you take what's in the bracket, make it equal to 0. And I explained before how you did this. You can review, I want to say 5.4 as to why this works. We're just going to do it. Well, okay. Really what's happening is that you're dividing both sides by x plus 8, which leaves you with a 2x minus 5. Or you divide both sides by 2x minus 5, which leaves you with x plus 8. And the algebra itself, I'd like to think, is self-explanatory at this point. Hopefully you're good with it. Now, last chapter, pretty much everything that we gave, last two chapters, I should say, pretty much everything I gave you was in factored form, or you had to put it into factored form. Of course, we're going to make life more equation. And the key is put it into standard form first. I did say standard form was kind of useless before, and it wasn't entirely true. The information that we're able to get from standard form is useful to us in other settings. So whatever it is that we're looking for, if we're trying to solve for that unknown, then we got to set it equal to 0. Okay, so here it's already done for us. This one's already equal to 0. So we got a factor. And I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Well, ARS negative 60. And I'll be honest, when I did this, I had to go through and find my numbers. In order to find my match. So none of this is new. All of this is stuff that you have seen, or at least today's lesson is. So if I'm racing through it and you don't know what's going on, then chances are you need to review chapter 5 and or review those algebra skills. Maybe even chapter 4 as I'm looking at me partial factoring. Oops, that should be a -5. Notice I'm moving away from fractions. It's really, you should be using fractions, but I did say you could cheat and use decimals. The big advantage to decimals is when it's a nice, easy number. So like 2.5 is a nice, easy decimal. This is an ugly decimal. And as soon as you have to round, you lose all kinds of accuracy. Okay, so continuing on, here we don't have it equal 0, which is bad. So we gotta make it so that it is equal 0. What is that? -2x. Right? That's what we want. We got to get it to make equal 0. Okay. How are we doing for time? 7 minutes. I'm going to do one of these examples just because I don't want this taking forever, and I do want to spend a little bit of time on the word question. Now I'm putting a few steps together. 2x plus 2x is 4x, minus 1 is 3x, 1 minus 2. Okay. Oops. That should be, oh no, that should be a plus. Uh, okay, so let's have a look at this word question. A ball was thrown from the top of the seaside cliff. Its height in meters above the sea after t seconds can be modeled by h equals blah, blah, blah. How long will the ball take to fall 20 meters below its initial height? So the reason that I'm highlighting this is that I'll be honest, when I did this in my own personal copy, I messed it up twice before I realized what the wording was talking about. H is above sea level. Therefore, 20 meters Okay, so you got to pay attention to the wording sometimes. And yes, I know this is why people hate word questions, because sometimes things are phrased in certain ways and it doesn't make sense. It actually does. Um, but it isn't how we naturally think of things, right? As soon as I forced you to look at it, I'm willing to bet that every one of you went, oh, yeah, that's easy math. It totally makes sense. But why do I have to do that? You must do it because of how H is defined. Since H is above the sea level, it means that when we substitute into the equation, it also must be above the sea level. So since H equals 100, we sub it in for H and solve for T. Hopefully at this point, everyone's on board. And it is one of those irritating things. Like I said, I had to redo my question twice before I finally realized what the wording was. Wording messes me up as well. I just understand why we have these issues. ARS equals negative 100. And in this case, it's 25 and 4. I don't know about you, that's just where my mind goes. Always frustrates me when everything's going swimmingly and then for no apparent reason, my penmanship suddenly starts sucking. And I don't think it's because I'm writing any differently, but it must be something I'm doing. Because I'm assuming the computer isn't going, yeah, that's long enough of life being good. We better start messing this kid up. Sorry, that should be a minus. Now, I don't necessarily have to have you write this down, but in most instances, negative time makes no sense, right? We're not throwing the ball backwards in time. We're only going forwards. So it means, what are we throwing a ball? And you can rephrase it however you want. I've chosen to go back to the human version. The ball has fallen 20 meters after 100 seconds, but the mathematical version of the ball is at 100 meters height after 5 seconds works just as well. Okay, guys, that was an awful lot of algebra, and unfortunately, that is a sign of things to come. A lot of this chapter is going to be very algebra based, so hopefully your algebra is up to snuff. If it's not, make sure to do your homework and get it to where it needs to be. All right, hope everybody's doing well.